start.
Okay. Welcome. I'm Wynn Kane, co-president with Liz Bradner of the League of Women Voters of Lake Forest, Lake Bluff area. Co-sponsoring with us is the Office of Community Education of Lake Forest College. We'd like to thank them for hosting us today, and a thank you to our program chairman, Carol Gale, who just stepped in, who is associate professor at Lake Forest College and director of community education, for her part in providing today's program. The League is a nonpartisan, nonprofit, national, state, and local political organization which encourages informed and active participation in government. It works to increase understanding of major political policy issues and influences public policy through education and advocacy. The program today, Water, Just What Are We Drinking?, will be presented by Beth Cozen, Director of Education for EcoMyths Alliance, which is a nonprofit environmental organization which empowers people to make eco-friendly choices by presenting simple science in entertaining ways. EcoMyths has a monthly segment that can be heard on the NPR noontime radio program with Jerome McDonald. Our speaker today, Beth Cozen, has a double major in environmental science and geography from DePaul University and is in the process of writing EcoMyths' new K-12 curriculum called The Truth About Drinking Water. We're pleased to have Beth with us this afternoon to help us answer our question, just what are we drinking? Beth?
Thank you. All right. So, as our lovely introduction, but yeah, my name is Beth Cozen. I am the Education Director for EcoMyths Alliance. I've been with them for nearly a year. And as we all know what we're here to talk about today, so I'm not gonna reiterate. But just a little bit of background about the organization that I work for. Our mission, just as she kind of summarized, we inspire people to make eco-friendly choices by presenting simple science, and we try to incorporate humor anytime we can. So it's a way of conveying maybe sometimes difficult to understand ideas in a really friendly, approachable way. Ooh, that's nice.
I'm trying to do more too.
That'd be cool. Ooh, nice. All right, that's perfect. So we do this. The work that we do is based on the amazing people that we partner with. And these organizations up here, these are members of our alliance. So all the content that we produce, we rely on the expertise and the scientists to provide us with that information. We take that information, boil it down, present it into short articles, write some cartoons about it. But everything we do would not be possible without the amazing people working at these places. Because we've seen that the daily barrage is so disheartening. You're constantly berated by the flooding and the droughts and terrible, terrible things and pollution. And what does it really do? Well, the result is not action. The result is confusion, is boredom, just feeling overwhelmed that there's like so many problems in the world, but what can I do? What can I do to help that? So that's where we step in. We do this 3 ways. We entice, enlighten, and empower. We write engaging articles, but we always leave you with a sense of one thing that you can do tomorrow or today that will help. It will actually help, and one person can make a difference. And we use this thing called the multiplier effect. So at the end of all of our articles, we say, okay, you save 2 pounds of recycling this week, and then everybody in the country saves 2 pounds of recycling this week. Math, math, math. Look at how much recycling we all have saved. We also, as she had mentioned, we have different methods of engagement. We are on WBEZ's Worldview program once a month. We are on social media. We also send out monthly newsletters, and we are a digital organization, meaning our content everything we do, you can find on our website. So, a little bit of background about myself. I am a double major in environmental science and geography from DePaul University. As you can see from these photos, I have done a lot of different things in the natural world. If you have any questions, we can talk about these pictures later. So, let's get down to business. Let's talk about water. So, what is water? Someone raise their hand. What's water? What's what? H2O. Nice. I have stickers. I have stickers in the back, ma'am. Sticker for you. So it's a molecule. It's H2O, 2 H's, 2 hydrogen atoms stuck to an oxygen. We're not really going to go into chemistry because I know that's probably not why y'all came here. But sometimes it looks like this. This is kind of what we're going to think about today. Where does it come from? The sky. Not about that. That's a tough one because it's actually part of the water cycle, meaning that it does have a gaseous phase in the sky, but it also comes from the rivers. And it's this cycle, this constant cycle of evaporation, condensation in the cloud, and then precipitation down to the ground. The longer, or I guess the shorter answer would be space. We have a finite amount of water on our planet. When our planet was created, all that water that came from all those explosions and those awesome planets crashing into each other, that's where our water came from, and it's not going anywhere. We just have this amount. This is what we have to work with. So this is why we have to be so conscious about these water issues. So we're not getting any more. So why is it so good at getting dirty? So everyone talks about clean water. Where's the clean water? We want clean water. There's a lot more dirty water than there is clean water. And there's a reason for that. Water is so good at getting dirty because it is referred to as the universal solvent, meaning it can dissolve anything, pretty much anything. There are some conditions, but out of all the liquid that we know of, it is the only liquid that can dissolve the most stuff. So think about it. We like that because if we're feeling sick, we have toxins in our body, we drink water, that water sticks onto those toxins and we flush it out of our system. That's a good thing, that anything in our bodies dissolves into water and takes it out. But when you think about these big natural systems, water is also flushing out and taking with it whatever it meets along the way. So this is a good thing. This is a really good thing that it's a universal solvent, but this is something we also have to be aware of when we're considering these larger water systems. It's also very attractive. And I mean that because of its, if we think back of that molecule, it has a negative end and a positive end. And just that, the way that the molecule is built makes it grab things really, really easy. So where do you get your water from? It's not a rhetorical question. Lake Michigan? Okay. Lake Michigan? You know what? 77% of Americans do not know where their drinking water comes from. The Nature Conservancy polled Americans, 77%. So don't worry. Don't worry. There's a lot of people out there that don't know where their drinking water comes from. Does anybody not live in Lake County? Not live in Lake County. Anybody? Okay, cool. So, we're going to be talking about potable. What does potable mean? Drinkable. It comes from the Latin word potabilis, meaning drinkability. So, Lake County people, you have two options. You get your water either from surface water or from groundwater. Currently, about 74% of Lake County residents are getting it through surface water. If you're not, you're part of that 26% that's getting it from groundwater. Now, I talked to Phil, and Phil said that surface water means that you're at the mercy of whatever anybody's dumping into that surface water. And look up here. This is a drawing of a watershed. A watershed just means kind of a geographic area where water pours down into. So we're in the watershed. You could think of a large watershed like the Great Lakes. So these watershed the watershed has surface area on top of it, so we could pretend that's Lake Michigan. Those are some rivers, but it also has groundwater. And when water hits the surface, it trickles down and becomes groundwater. So there's surface water on top, and there's groundwater under the ground, kind of like little puddles deep down, 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 down in the ground. That just kind of stays there. So it's different. They're different kinds of water, things that affect them differently. They're not always going to react to the water cycle the same way. Think about evaporation. The sun is hitting Lake Michigan. Obviously, there's going to be some evaporation. The sun's not really getting down into those lower aquifers. So maybe evaporation, maybe it's happening because maybe it's hotter or something, but it's not the same. So these pockets of water are very different. So we need to treat them differently as people who are drinking from them. And as far as Phil is the operations technician for Lake County Public Works. I had a great conversation with him. He's awesome. If you have any more questions, you can call up Phil. But he said that groundwater, this is dependent on geography and what the water passes through or near. So if you think about it, we know it's attractive. We know it's a universal solvent. So if it's passing through a landfill, passing under a landfill, passing through an agricultural or industrial waste site, it's going to be grabbing all of those icky little things and pulling it down with it wherever it's going. So, moving forward. The surface water. A lot of you said Lake Michigan. This is a map of how you get your water. There's a raw pump station. This side is Lake Michigan. This side is your house. And you can follow the map to see the water distribution system. So, Lake County people, you have a state-of-the-art water treatment facility. It's awesome. It's really, 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 really good. Another reason why we don't need to worry about the bottled water. It's so many issues we could talk about there. But you should be drinking your tap water because it's awesome. I talked to Phil. He reassured me. So your Lake County water is actually purchased for you by the Central Lake County Joint Action Water Agency. They're the ones just in charge of paying whoever they need to pay to make sure Lake County gets as much as it needs to go. How many gallons per minute. They regulate that kind of stuff. Then it goes through the state-of-the-art treatment facility. Lake County actually tests for more compounds and more things than the EPA regulates for. That's good. That's a good thing. We'll talk about regulations down the road, but this is good. This is why Lake County has really good water. They go above and beyond what the EPA, is requiring of them. And this is just how it happens. There's a flow, obviously. It starts in Lake Michigan. You have ozonation, rapid mix, flocculation, sedimentation, filtration, UV treatment, clear pumping station. Everyone knows exactly what those words mean, right? Right? No. No, what does that mean? So this is actually, we have some cool pictures. So there's the pumping station. It just looks like your everyday, you probably drive past it a million times and never know what's actually in that building. Doesn't look any fancier than any other building. But it goes through an ozonation tank where they actually use O3, ozone, the ozone that's in the ozone layer. They create it in the facility, and they use it to kill off living things, so microbial bacteria and different living small things. And that's how they zap it. It doesn't linger in the water. It's something that kind of happens, kills everything off, and is gone within about 20 minutes. So that's not something we have to worry about. Then rapid mix, there's no picture. It's just kind of like this. And then flocculation is a weird word. But think about flock, like sheep are in a flock. So flocculation is when they do this technical thing to encourage solids to flock together, because then they'll get heavier. Because in the next step, the sedimentation step, they're waiting for gravity to do its thing. Gravity is really good at bringing things down. So we have all of these clumps, all of these flocks of stuff, solids, dead microorganisms from the first stage, and gravity takes it down. Then it's collected. It goes through different tubes. And then at the end of this process, some other kind of arrow this way, they actually take all the solids that were pulled from our drinking water, and they go dispose of them correctly somewhere else. Maybe some of it actually would go into a landfill. Some of it might be hazardous. They would take it to wherever they need to. Then they filter it, Then they zap it with UV. UV is an excellent disinfectant. This could be in place of chlorine. Sometimes people do both chlorine and UV, but UV is awesome because we found out we can actually instantly disinfect water without using chemicals. And that's kind of cool. And then these are the pumps. The clear well just means big holding chamber for clean water. So it's just like you'll just see, like when you're driving past these water treatment facilities, big cement, kind of like chamber looking things sticking out of the water. That's just clean water waiting to be pumped out and transmitted. Moving on. So if you are groundwater people, this is less cut and dry, but very interesting. So groundwater, you get your groundwater from aquifers. Everyone know what an aquifer is? Aquifers? Yes, ma'am. 2 stickers today. Storage. Oh, this is great. She says storage. It's exactly what it is. It's like in your mind, think of an underground puddle. So it's just like a puddle that's underground, surrounded by earth that doesn't really move for a long period of time. It took a long time to get there, and it would take a long time to get out. But we're pumping it, so we're actually taking it out a little bit faster. So we have 3 different kinds of aquifers here in our region. We have sand and gravel aquifers, shallow bedrock aquifers, and deep bedrock aquifers. These are the depths that they are present at, and these is actually a snapshot. These are each wells. So you can see the shallow bedrock, I cannot say this word, shallow bedrock aquifers, these wells, and then the wells for the sand and gravel aquifers. So if 6 people were in this room and you are all groundwater people, you may not be drawing from the same aquifer. This is totally dependent on where you live, what your township is, when your township was incorporated. So this is very different. Lake County eventually wants to move everybody to the Lake Michigan water. That's a goal of theirs. So they're slowly trying to phase out and install better pipelines and systems. But this is a site-specific treatment. So we saw that workflow. We know how water is treated from the lake, but this is different because each aquifer is different. Each part of Lake County is different. Some parts of Lake County have a lot of sulfur in their water, so they have to treat for sulfur, but they don't have to treat for sulfur in the places where there's minimal sulfur or no sulfur at all. So if you want to find out how exactly your specific well water is being treated, you're going to need to do a little homework. Go on the Lake County Public. You can see the maps. It's very clear. It's not difficult, but it's all that information is out there for you. So it does contain more minerals. We say that's hard water. So a lot of times we think of groundwater as being harder water. Hardness actually doesn't affect us personally, health-wise. It's considered a nuisance. So yeah, it can be bad for your pipe, kind of bad for your laundry. It leaves some spots, but it's nothing that would harm us. So the EPA actually doesn't regulate this. So this is kind of the township would say, oh, this water we're getting, we're too hard. It's too hard. Our constituents aren't happy with it. So let's administer some water softeners. So that's something that's regulated. Hardness is something that is regulated on a very small scale because it doesn't affect us. So now that we are all experts on where we get our water, let's talk about our water. So our water, like I mentioned before, is regulated first by the municipalities, then by the state EPA, and then by the federal EPA. So the EPA, the federal EPA, can't obviously be in every town and every moment and every day. That would be impossible. So we rely on this chain of command. But if at the municipal level, if something were to go wrong, that would be a federal issue. So it's not like they would just go to, like, people that live in Deerfield would just go to the Deerfield prison. No, it's a big issue. If these guidelines aren't followed, it becomes a federal issue. So this is, all right, get ready. Don't read everything. Don't try to read everything. It's a lot of information. So this is the regulations. So when you look up regulations, you can read and read and read and read and read forever. It's very interesting. But a couple of the most important things to take away is we have the primary drinking water regulations. These are about 90 contaminants, microorganisms, disinfectants That's chlorine. Disinfectant byproducts, that's things that result from adding the chlorine. There's organic chemicals, inorganic chemicals, that's metal, organic chemicals. There's things that contain carbon, things that come from maybe a once living thing. And radionuclides, that's like radium. These are those gases that we're concerned about. So the standards are based on max contaminant levels. That means everything you read, if you go through these charts, and you can read Lake County, you guys have these charts. You'll see everything they test for, and you'll see something called MCGL or MCL. This is your max contaminant level. They're going to have a weight or a number, and it says at this number, at this weight, this is the most anybody could possibly take before death, basically. So you can look at that and say, that number is getting up pretty high. That's a little bit higher. So some municipalities will say, what are we going to do to bring that number down because it's getting near the unsafe level? So these are good guides. This is something important for you to remember. That means if you look at your water reports and it's something, the only thing I can think of right now is lead. So you see a tiny, 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 tiny percent of lead that is way under the maximum contaminant level. You may still have lead in your water. But we trust science, and we trust science tells us that that amount of lead is okay, that there has been no research, no support to show that there has been any significant health impacts by having that tiny little bit amount. So this is just something to keep in mind. You may have things present in your water, but that are nowhere near the levels that you should be concerned about. We trust that our governments are actually being regulated. And people have gone to jail for this. Crestwood, Illinois is a pretty cool story if we go home and look up on Wikipedia. People went to jail because for over 40 years, there was dry cleaning byproducts being put into the drinking water, and the mayor went to jail, the former mayor went to jail. So they cracked down pretty hard. This is very, very serious stuff. So primary, secondary, these are the non-enforceables. These are 15 contaminants such as copper, pH, that means whether something's an acid or a base, color, aluminum, chloride, odor, zinc, etc. So these are the 15 that maybe Lake County decides that they want to enforce. Maybe your township decides that we want our pH a little lower, or we want the color to look different. So the reason EPA doesn't enforce these is because a lot of it's just aesthetic and kind of a preference thing, and some people might care, some people might not. Some people, that's how they've grown up, so they don't even notice the difference. And then there's the unregulated contaminant monitoring program. Now this is the stuff that you should watch. As an informed and engaged electorate, this is where you come in. So the EPA actually requires itself to seek out public information, public outcry, public response to this list. And we call it the contaminant candidate list. Every couple years they come out with a new one. We have CCL for 2014. So this draft that you guys could go home and weigh in on and write letters to your mayors and to your representatives, these are the things, this is how you get involved in this process and how you take action about these regulations. Right now, there's about 100 chemicals or chemical groups and 12 microbial contaminants. These things include chemicals from pesticides, from pharmaceuticals. These are things that we think could be dangerous. We think might get dangerous the more we put into our water, but they're currently not regulated. So then they look at this list. It comes up for review. If there's enough science, enough public outcry to merit a scientific investigation, they will add it to the primary drinking water standards. So it changes. It's not like it constantly changes because constantly we're coming up with new ways to mess with our environment. We're really good at innovating new chemicals to just throw into our water. So this has to be changed too. Right. I know it's a little dense. It's a lot to read. The website's really good if you want to read more about this. It's all on the EPA's website. So we're going to talk about impacts. So we're going to talk about pesticide fertilizer, at-home impacts, and impacts from industry kind of as a whole. So our pesticides and fertilizers. Now, pesticides and fertilizers, I'm going to talk to you guys, but this is also something that we can open up the scope and really think about large-scale farming, large-scale agriculture. These are things, these issues that we're going to talk about right now, do apply to large industry. So the reason why pesticides and fertilizers are really bad is because they're introducing chemicals to an environment that has for thousands of years been cycling its nutrients just fine without us. These animals, the microorganisms in the soil, everything that lives above ground, below ground, this whole ecosystem, they were there way before we were trying to plant gardens and fertilize lawns. They can take care of it. So we don't really need to introduce all those new chemicals. We can do things to promote healthy grass, to promote healthy garden, but pesticides are really a big problem. They're found over 90% of the time in streams, in more than 80% of fish sampled, and in 33% of major aquifers. All you people getting your water from aquifers, this matters, because think about it. That's the groundwater going through the farmland, seeping through, going all the way down to the bedrock, creating those aquifers. So that's the other problem, is agricultural and industrial runoff is a huge problem for everybody. It also affects surface water. Fertilizer is really bad because it is both phosphorus and nitrogen. So the reason people buy fertilizer is for its nitrogen, basically. It says phosphorus. Some people like to think that they're buying it also for phosphorus. But nitrogen is what really stimulates growth. Think about, you can over stimulate, add too much nitrogen. Like think of if your dog pees on a corner of your lawn, that lawn might turn yellow and die because he's actually putting on too much nitrogen. So too much is always a bad thing. You can kill those organisms, but the phosphorus is really the huge problem, because when phosphorus runs off from your gardens and into the streams, it promotes something called algae blooms. Now, there's been algae blooms in the news recently. Do we remember it? Yeah, I see some people nodding. Yeah, algae blooms were a big problem in Lake Erie. There was this blue-green algae scare, and it was very terrible. But phosphorus from fertilizer, from agricultural runoff, it promotes algae blooms. What that means is phosphorus in the water, the algae, the plant organisms are like, oh my God, there's so much for me to eat. And they just eat and eat and eat and eat and eat and eat and eat. So they just become huge. So it's just huge mass of algae. But it's a plant. So it's taking all that oxygen out of the water as it's growing and being this big monster. That means there's no oxygen left for the fishes. So we have massive fish kills when we have algae blooms, because that algae is like way throwing everything off balance, taking all the oxygen, blocks off all the sunlight. It's not a good thing. So we actually have a huge dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico, about 700,000 square miles that's caused by the runoff coming down the Mississippi-Missouri River from 31 different states. So this is a problem. It's a big problem, but you at home, you can make the conscious choice not to use these products. Because are they really necessary? Are they really needed to get a beautiful garden or to get a beautiful lawn? What do you think the answer is? They are not needed. There are safe solutions to these. So if you want to use pesticides, you feel like, man, these pests are really, and also, side note, what's a pest? Like, that's so broad. It's such a broad category of thing. So pesticides, you can grow your own pesticide solution, meaning sometimes there are garlic-based sprays you can make. There are different ways of using household items and household ingredients to target and make things smell less desirable to pesky pests. You can encourage natural predators. This is what agriculturalists are doing on a large scale. It's called integrated pest management, meaning you have one animal, like a ladybug that likes one plant, and ladybugs are great at eating aphids. So you plant the plant that the ladybugs like around the plant that the aphids like, meaning that you're encouraging those predators to be in the same area as the aphids, as what it likes to predate against. So using this, think about your gardens and your lawns as a system. How can you use nature against itself? Because nature is really good at regulating its own systems. You can also use row covers. You can build different structures that might keep pests away better. And if you absolutely must use pesticides, you can do your research. You can look, okay, what chemical is in this one? They're getting more clear about what's actually contained in them. They are selling a lot more environmentally friendly pesticides. So just do your homework. And again, with fertilizer, the best way to add nitrogen to your lawn is to not rake it. Don't do more work. Don't do more work and you'll get greener lawns. That's awesome. You could also leave your grass about 3 inches tall. Slightly longer grass will actually help conserve water, will help it fight against weeds better, and just be an overall healthier, greener lawn. Again, if you absolutely must, do your homework. Make sure it's phosphorus free. Make sure that when you spread it around, it's not on your cement, your walkways, your sidewalks, because then it won't permeate into the ground. It will definitely run off into the street, into the sewer system. So make sure you never apply fertilizer on pavement. Now, we're going to go through this kind of quickly at home. All the information. Do you have a question? What's your question?
Fertilizers and the pesticides, a sense of percentages of home versus farming.
Right.
As far as putting it into the environment. Is it most out in farming, most out in just home, your personal homes?
Right. So that's a good question. It's a tough question. It's the kind of question where you can say, I don't own a bazillion acre farm. So obviously, if somebody owns a bazillion acre farm and they're doing a bad thing, that bad thing is going to be amplified, that bazillion acreage or whatever he has. So it might feel like what we do is insignificant, but it's not. We have science, we have data, and we have research saying even around Middle Fork. You look around Middle Fork and you can test the soil that's around Middle Fork, and if people are using fertilizer right around Lake Forest Open Lands, if you're interested in this story, Lake Forest Open Lands was very much aware of people would fertilize their lawn next to a gorgeous prairie, and that would help the degradation of the prairie. But every lawn counts. It all counts. But yes, there is a difference of scale, and what we do might be overshadowed by what they are doing. But a lot of times we can test things in a small scale and then use it for models on a larger scale. So it's worth it. Yeah.
Also, to answer those questions, there are more pesticides used on homes than in agriculture. They're used a lot in agriculture, and it's a significant amount of them. And I can get you a book that will tell you exactly how we did that for a project. But unfortunately, Americans use more pesticides than
Yeah.
so that's a really sad situation.
And also, we're not,
Because they're not doing it right.
exactly, we're not trained.
Then over here.
Yeah. If you do it, you're not trained like the professional pesticide applicators. Yeah. All right. More questions?
Well, I'm showing my ignorance, but
That's fine.
organic fertilizer, is that truly safe?
I would guess that's kind of like poop, which is safe. So a lot of times organic, what? Say. Yeah, so you can use organic fertilizer, and fertilizer is kind of a broad term of something that stimulates growth in something that's growing. So a lot of time compost can be really good because you're using organic material breaking down will stimulate growth and will fertilize it. So compost is an excellent organic fertilizer. Does that help to answer your question?
How about the companies?
The companies, that's something you would have to look into. At home, we use compost, but that's something that you really would have to do your research on. Just a lot of legwork for that. Anybody else? Okay, moving on. So we're gonna kind of zip through a little bit of these. All the information today can be found on our website, eaglemissalliance.org. Everything is taken basically from the articles that we have up there. So in our home, proper disposal of medications. Who flushes their medications down the drain? Don't raise your hand. I don't want to see it. So that's really, 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 really bad, because pharmaceuticals are not treated by our water treatment plants, because a lot of these drugs were just invented in the past 10 years, 20 years. So we're finding in the water, in the aquatic environments, we're finding hormone drugs, birth control, antidepressants. Now think about fish on antidepressants. Like, it just, like, they're getting it in their bodies. And they were found in 80% of streams contain a small amount of medicine. Steroids, over-the-counter drugs, and bug repellents are the most commonly found. So this is not good. So this is another way for you to protect your own drinking water, is to not flush your medicine. Don't put it in a landfill either, because think about that groundwater. If you put something in a landfill, water, 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 rain, 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 it would take those chemicals out then with it to the groundwater, to streams, and then out to wherever it's going. So the best option is find a take-back program. Many municipalities have them. It's just a matter of going online, Googling take-back program with your zip code, and I bet you'll find one. A lot of times they have them at fire departments, and sometimes CVS will do it, I think. Next, microplastics. This is a hot button issue that more and more press is coming out about. The Tribune, Chicago Tribune has been writing a couple articles on these. Microplastics. It used to be just microbeads, not the case. It's microplastics. So microplastics is of any piece of plastic debris of less than 5 millimeters. So kind of like this, these tiny little things. They are in face scrubs. They're in toothpaste. They're in just different, anything that might be slightly abrasive, companies are using plastic for. There's been a huge backlash, so now companies are using coconut fibers and things that aren't harmful to the environment. But microplastics is pellets, small things, could be parts of styrofoam, fibers, fragments, film, like saran wrap. If you're wearing a synthetic fleece sweater, those synthetic fibers, think about them, where they come apart and they have them just floating in the ocean right now. So this is also something that is becoming a huge, huge, huge concern for the quality of our water systems and where we get our drinking water from. And the other one, the last one, antibacterial soap. So there's a chemical in antibacterial soap called Triclosan. And Triclosan might be in your bathroom right now. It is an antibacterial agent, and we've been using almost 1 million pounds of it annually for half a century. Its name, Triclosan, tri meaning 3 chlorine atoms, so triclo, and then san actually comes from the name Irca-San. I'm assuming it's the company that makes it. It has a lot of impacts. The studies are mounting that it's a hormone endocrine disruptor. It's actually increasing allergies because you're killing a lot of good bacteria that will help us not create allergies. It's disrupting the aquatic systems that it's in. Also some heartwarming statistics. They're found in 60% of streams and rivers. It has a half-life of 1.5 years, meaning that it takes 1.5 years for half what any amount to break down. So you can do the math. Start with 100, half-life, take 1.5 years to get to 50, take another 1.5 years to get to 25, et cetera, et cetera. It is in 60%. Oh, I think I said that already. It's also in the urine of nearly 75% of people tested, which is kind of freaky to think about, that it might actually be in you right now, and you can find it. Also, it's in about 140 different kinds of products. It can also migrate. If you wash your counter with something that contains triclosan, it can stay there and actually get onto your food. It can migrate from surfaces to your food. It's also not comforting. So what do you do about this? You just stop buying it. Don't use it. The more people that are aware of it and the more people that spread the word about it, this is how we nip that problem down. So go home, look at the ingredients, and if it's triclosan, don't use it. You don't need it. It's not cleaner. Studies have shown that it is not significantly cleaner than using any other regular kind of soap. So the broad one, industry. So I'm going to talk about it through the perspective of our Great Lakes. So industry and agricultural, they've been dumping things into our Great Lakes since the turn of the century. This is a long standing problem. The EPA regulations on this are called effluent guidelines. So there's guidelines saying how much you can put out into our Great Lakes. This, however, is not based on the risk or impacts of the receiving water, which might sound a little weird. I think it sounds a little weird. But they're based on the performance of treatment and control technologies. So it's basically if you're able to get it if you're able to decrease this percentage with what technology you have now, then that's the guideline. If you can imagine for an industrial plant that's been on the sides of one of these lakes for hundreds of years, it might be very difficult for them to just stop altogether. They're working. These guidelines, they're working to eventually curb everything, but they're limited by the technology and the ability of what people can actually do right now to solve the problem. There are also airshed bans. So the EPA also keeps track of not only what's directly going into the water, but what is coming to the water from the sky. So it's called airshed bans. So we have a watershed, that's where our water is. This is the airshed. Meaning up in Canada, or maybe over in Idaho, if something is released into the air, like a particulate, some sort of pollution, it will take 5 days for it to reach the Great Lakes. We know that. We can count that. Can't stop it, but we know how long it'll take. And each lake is very different. So if you want to know how Lake Michigan specifically is impacted by pollutants, you would need to really go on the EPA's website and see how large it is, how deep it is, what the recharge period is, which means how long it takes it basically to turn over new water. So some of them actually handle pollutants better. So Lake Superior is one of the cleanest lakes because of just how the area around it was developed and what time period, what kind of, if there's forests around there, if there's other things, buffers. So it all just depends. The reason why we're very concerned is because of this graphic. This is representative of bioaccumulation. Now, bioaccumulation is what makes us nervous because there might be mercury in Lake Michigan, but it's not enough if we drank, we're not going to do that, if we drank straight from Lake Michigan, took a cup, and drank it, the amount of mercury in that cup for us would do nothing. We would not be affected by it. But we should still be concerned because these little animals, they're these bottom feeders, and when the bottom feeders get eaten by the larger fish get eaten by the larger fish, so on and so on and so on. By the time it gets to us, that little bit of mercury has now magnified. However many times it went up the feeding, this is called bioaccumulation. It's accumulating in the biology of those that are eating it. So this is why it's a problem, because people love fishing. And we want to be able, and if we're going to eat the fish, we need to know that there's the least amount of mercury in the water that we can do as possible, because we don't want mercury-filled fish. So again, the Great Lakes, even though they're very large, they are very vulnerable to pollutants from runoff, industrial, municipal, and facilities, spills, and hazardous waste sites. Another problem is, have you ever heard of point, non-point sources for pollution? Something's a point source, a non-point source. These are ways to describe pollution. So if I spill this water, it's running over, there's a point that I can find that released that water onto the table. I can find it. There is a point where it's spilled. This is the point. If you dump your water, you dump your water, you dump your water, everybody just dumps their water, and I look at this puddle, I can't really find the point that one person did it. So that's hard. That's a non-point pollution source. So that's what's tough about these regulations, is that we don't know which one of you is the one with the chemicals in the water. We don't know which one. So we can say, yes, there's pollution. There's this much pollution. Industry says, well, it's not mine. It is. I didn't do it. So it's very, very difficult. It's a very difficult situation. We're getting better. We're getting a lot better. Recently, the Alliance for the Great Lakes has an awesome page on their website where we, and along with Canada, we have formed a lot of agreements over the past 20, 50 years to really cracking down and figuring this out. So there's hope. It's not terrible, but there's hope. So what are the lasting impacts? So the retention time in Lake Michigan specifically is around 100 years. That means that the stuff was discharged 50 years ago is still making its way around the lake, including legacy contaminants. So things we banned 50 years ago, they're still there. They're still there because it takes 100 years. So maybe in 150 years, whatever we banned then might be gone or maybe just traces. But you can see it. Regulation doesn't just take effect. We can ban a substance, but it'll take 100, 150 years before it's gone from the water, which means we have to be on our toes, really. We have to really, as soon as something becomes a problem, start to heavily regulate it to make that window smaller. Did you have a question? Yeah, PCBs were a big one. Yeah, very long lived. So these are things that would have the longer half-lives. Yeah, it is all different. It all depends. Yeah, but as a general rule, you can think about, well, if we banned something that has a long lifespan 50 years ago, it would still hanging around. Questions? So, really quickly, what about climate change? Good question, Mr. Fish. So, climate change affects everything. We kind of know that. We've heard about that by now. But what about fresh water and our drinking water specifically? So, water temperatures matter. Water temperatures are so important because if you think about everything that lives in the water, they're all cold-blooded. We're warm-blooded. If it's warm, you're warm-blooded. If your armpit's cold, you're a lizard. So if our temperature rises, if we take our temperature and it rises a few degrees, we are not doing well. We are not feeling good. We are not operating at our optimal level. This is just the same for the aquatic environments. If a fish is swimming in water that used to be 50 degrees, and that for thousands of years and hundreds of years, it's evolved to be at about 50 degrees, and that's where it shines. But if we increase that temperature just a few degrees, then it's sick. Then it's not operating at its optimal threshold. So you can think of it as just like when we have a fever. So the problem is that the temperature is rising and the water temperature is rising, which means everything's starting to get thrown off whack. Things are starting to move down to get to colder temperatures. It affects where the predators and prey, they're both moving differently to either get away or go to more favorable conditions. It's going to impact the water cycle. An increased overall global temperature means that there will be more water in the evaporation stage. That cycle, evaporation, condensation, precipitation, that depends on the temperature that it's always been, where things have been established. But if we look and things are changing, this is the projected changes to the water cycle. This is the U.S. U.S. Global Climate Research Group. So this is many different people, many different heads head this group up. But these are the changes. We're going to get increased sediment. The ocean, we're going to get increased evaporation because it's so warm. We're going to get more evaporation. So it's going to really change the water cycle. And we hear about water scarcity issues. Everyone's saying, we have terrible droughts going on right now. It's becoming more scarce. Now, remember when I said the water on our planet is finite, meaning we don't have more now than we ever did or have less water on this earth than we ever have. It's what stage it's in. where it is. If it's being locked up into building our clothes, if it's just being held, every time we make jeans, we're using water. We're using water to make things. Is that water being trapped in the things that we're making? Is it being changed because all of the different states, solid, liquid, gas, those are all changing because of this different and increased global temperatures? So we don't really, there's so many different ways to predict and to think about what the outcome might be, but it's definitely going to affect everything about water that we know right now. So, what do? We just cry? No, we don't cry. We get educated. We take action. And we share that. So this is doom and gloom. Oh man, all the fish are going to die. That's easy. It's easy to sink into that thought. But you can't do that. You can't do that because now that you know the issues and know that the EPA is going to listen to you when you talk about the contaminants that are up for debate, you have to get involved and you have to take action. In our organization, we have something called One Green Thing, where we look at all these problems. We look at the problem of global warming or water pollution, and we think, what is one thing I can do for water conservation? Well, one thing you can do, you can swap in a low-flow shower head. You can conserve water. There are many ways to conserve water. Rain barrels. These are simple things that if everybody does them, will make a significant impact on the water resources we have available to us. So it's easy to look at a large problem and think that you can't do anything. But you can. There are simple solutions. So one thing you can do is you can go on our website. All of these issues have articles associated with them. And in each article it says what one green thing you can do and how your impact will make a large difference. All right. So that's my part. Is there any questions?
What's the latest about desalination? Do they have processes that are becoming economically viable?
I'm not sure on the economic viability. I'm not sure. The question was desalinization and where we are with that in technology. That's something I'm not as aware of. Desalinization, for those of you who know, is taking salt water, which we obviously can't drink, and reverse osmosis, meaning that it's taking the fresh water out of the salt water. And it's a very obvious, sounds complicated. It is a complicated process. It's also very expensive, but I am not sure. I know people are working on it, and I know it's always been an active area of research, but I'm not sure currently if any advances have been made since, to make it more economically viable. It's a good question. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
You really didn't touch base on sort of the macro system and how politics plays and good policy in relationship to water. And we know that can have a major effect. Everything from pollution, regulations, research, that sort of thing. Does your organization do anything as far as policy advocacy?
Our organization specifically does not. However, we work with the Alliance for the Great Lakes very closely, and the Alliance for the Great Lakes is a good resource if you want to learn about the policy. They're very involved with specifically Great Lakes policy for keeping and promoting the health and conservation of the Great Lakes. So that would be a great resource. But personally, for the organization I work for, we don't do policy specifically. Right. Yes.
This is maybe a little icky, but what happens to human waste?
What happens to human waste? That's a great question. So human waste, as long as it's going down a toilet and not anywhere else, I can talk about. So it's treated for. It's on the list of regulations and EPA drinking water standards. Fecal matter. There's coliform and different ways of classifying fecal matter with different science words, but it's all tested for, and the presence of it. And at each step, there's a test being done to make sure, did that test get out everything it intended to, what's still left in the water. So a lot of the solids waste, a lot of the solid human waste comes out over here, where this is before, this is a filter to take out any solids. So the solid waste is filtered out back there, and they put it on a truck, and they take it to somewhere to properly dispose of it because it is a human waste. The liquid waste, that is also filtered out through the treatment process and the disinfection.
But the sewage plants don't just send raw sewage into Lake Michigan, so isn't there a separate flow chart for what the sewage treatment plants do?
Yes, there is. It's similar to this one. It's actually very similar to this one. So there's different regulations where how disinfected does the water need to be before it's discharged back into Lake Michigan. I know it's different depending on where that treatment plant is. I don't have the exact differences, but it is a process very similar to this. We are trying to put out the cleanest water that we're also putting out from the system. So we try to kind of get it back to what we had it as. There's a little bit lower standards because somebody isn't specifically going to consume it, but it is still highly regulated that we're not putting coliform from human waste into Lake Michigan. Whenever you hear those E. coli warnings on the beaches, that's from seagulls and dogs. That's never from humans. So they take that out of it. That definitely doesn't get in there. Yeah.
There was in Cook County, mill organite was sold. It was collected from sewage treatment plants, I guess, and made into a dry fertilizer, which was put in bags, and there were certain locations
Yeah.
you could buy them. Is mill organite still used that way?
Do you know more about this, ma'am? You're nodding your head.
It's a
Wait.
product that is manufactured by the city of Milwaukee, has been sold for over 50 years.
Yeah.
Just can't use it in certain crops. It's legal on some things, not on others.
Right.
Also great deer repellent.
Nice. Great deer repellent.
There's certain places where you're not allowed to use it.
Okay. Yeah. So it is still being used. Can you buy it in Illinois, or is it? Do you know? Yeah. Right.
Maybe different as now, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess you can. Still being used. Yes.
Touch briefly on human medications.
Yeah.
In groundwater.
Yeah.
And I would guess that the percentage of those medications that result from people flushing excess meds down the toilet is very small compared to just the normal process of digestion and everything else. And those medications can not only be human, but also from farm animals and everything else. Is there anything happening as far as methods of approaching treatment for those medications? Because the chemical processes would be very complex, and we're developing more meds all the time.
Right.
We're using more meds all the time.
Right.
It seems like this is something that's going to keep on getting more and more important.
Right. Right. I think the largest hindrance to that is I showed earlier with the regulations, the candidate contaminant list. A lot of those are pharmaceutical, antibiotic, a lot of chemicals. I think from my knowledge from this stuff, and I'm sure people who work in agriculture might have a different response, but I would think before the industry, if judging from other things, before the industry starts to get proactive, there needs to be an enforceable law with teeth. And to get that enforceable law with teeth, we need to pass those candidate contaminant lists. And then they can put it on. And then they can say someone can get in trouble if you're not regulating for this. So I would think, yes, there's probably a lot of people that are thinking that, but that's really got to be the first step, unfortunately.
Just on, I something interesting. I always thought you had to just take it to the pharmacy to recycle the meds, and I recently read about if you can't get there to put expired medication in, mix it with used coffee grounds and put it in a sealed bag or something, and then it's safe to throw away. Is that something that you disagreed with?
It's safe to throw away as far as will any organism eat that medication after you. And so that's what they're doing is you're making it undesirable for another person to consume. The coffee doesn't neutralize or render harmless any of the chemicals that are in the drugs. So really that's just a way of getting it to the landfill without a raccoon eating it first. But you're still putting it, if you put it into the waste, it's still going into the landfill and still at risk of seeping into the groundwater.
So, are you aware of how when you take it to and dispose of it that way, how they process those expired
Yes.
medications?
Yes. What if something is easy enough for them to break down, or they know something's water soluble, maybe they'll handle it that way. But most of what they do is incinerate it, and which is interesting because we think like, oh, you're putting more CO2 into the atmosphere. But when you look at every single solution to the issue of unwanted drugs and loose medication, that is the most environmentally friendly way to keep it basically out of any other living system. Yeah. Yes?
While you're talking, but I was just looking online, and there is a solid waste agency of Lake County that has a page about medication disposal, and it says that collection boxes are located in police department lobbies.
Yeah.
They're right there. If there's a bin, it's been there.
Yeah, it's pretty easy. And you can go on and they'll say like, individual Ziploc bags or stuff like that. Some might require the label, some don't, but yeah, police stations are a really good place for that.
Do you have recommendations for how to test for water totals? I mean, I know that Lake Forest and Lake County has assured me that they're testing the way you get wet lens, but how do I know what my water is like at my home, like by the time it reaches my house?
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. There's a lot out there for you. So you can call Lake County, and maybe if you feel like you've kind of run into some roadblocks with them, but they will send people out to test and to show you. There are home kits you can use. You can buy them at Home Depot and Lowe's. They don't test for everything. It depends really what you're concerned with. But if you're concerned with pH or hardness or color or sulfur or iron or I believe there is a lead one too. A lot of those home kits you can just purchase and use. Some organizations, some organizations and some water specific organization will have kits that you can actually purchase from them that are maybe a little bit more comprehensive or come with different equipment. But there's a lot out there. And it would just be a matter of looking up, see what Home Depot has. But I would first call Lake County Public Works and say that you want your drinking water treated. But they have people available for that.
Thank you, Beth. We enjoyed having you.
Thank you.
And we hope you all, thank you for coming.